The smell of death hung in the air of room 304. Minjun Kim stood frozen in the doorway, his expensive Italian shoes making no sound on the cold hospital floor. His mother, the woman who had raised him alone, who had worked 3 jobs to keep him fed, who had never once complained about the cards life dealt her, lay motionless on the white hospital bed. Her skin looked like paper. Her breathing came in short, painful gasps. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the young black nurse standing beside his mother's bed, holding a strange clay bowl filled with dark liquid that smelled like earth and rain and something ancient. The nurse's hands were steady, but her eyes showed fear. Behind Minjun, 3 of his men stood ready, their hands inside their jackets where their guns waited. "Sir," the nurse said quietly, her voice shaking just a little. "I know you don't know me. I know this looks crazy, but if you let me give this to your mother, I can save her life." Minjun's jaw clenched. Every doctor in this hospital, the best hospital money could buy, had said his mother had maybe 3 days left. And now this nurse, this stranger, was telling him she had the answer in a bowl of what looked like muddy water? "Give me one reason," Minjun said, his voice cold as winter. "Why I shouldn't have my men throw you out of this room right now." The nurse looked him straight in the eyes. "Because your mother just squeezed my hand. Because 30 seconds ago, when I told her what this remedy is, she nodded yes. And because, Mr. Kim, you're running out of time. If you want to know how we got here, if you want to know whether Minjun's mother survives, subscribe, like and drop a comment below, and tell me where you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to where this impossible story really began. 3 weeks earlier, everything was normal. Well, as normal as life could be when your son ran the most powerful Korean crime organization in Los Angeles. Minjun Kim was not a good man. He knew this. At 32 years old, he controlled the drug trade, gambling, and protection rackets in Koreatown and beyond. People feared him. Politicians took his money and looked the other way. Police officers who got too curious found themselves transferred to desk jobs in distant precincts. But every Sunday, without fail, Minjun went to his mother's small apartment for dinner. Mrs. Sung-hee Kim lived in the same modest 2-bedroom apartment in Koreatown, where she'd raised Minjun alone after his father disappeared when Minjun was 5. She had cleaned offices at night, worked as a seamstress during the day, and sold homemade kimchi on weekends. Every penny went to Minjun's education, his clothes, and his future. Minjun had begged her 1,000 times to move into a mansion. He could buy her anything, a house in Beverly Hills, a penthouse downtown, whatever she wanted. But Sung-hee always refused. "This apartment holds my memories of raising you," she would say, patting his cheek like he was still a little boy. "Why would I leave?" She didn't ask about his business. Minjun suspected she knew, but they had an unspoken agreement. On Sunday evenings, he wasn't a crime boss. He was just her son, eating too much bulgogi and listening to her stories about the old country. On this particular Sunday in late October, Minjun arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, as always. His bodyguard, Dae-young, waited in the car downstairs. Minjun climbed the 3 flights of stairs and knocked 3 times, their special signal. He heard his mother's footsteps shuffling toward the door. But something was wrong. The footsteps sounded slower than usual, heavier. The door opened, and Minjun's blood went cold. His mother looked terrible. Her normally bright eyes were dull and tired. Her skin had a grayish tint. She was gripping the doorframe like she needed it to hold herself up. "Yama!" Minjun rushed forward, catching her as her knees buckled. "What's wrong? What happened?" I'm fine, Sung-hee said, but her voice was weak. "Just a little dizzy. I probably didn't eat enough lunch." Minjun half carried her to the couch. His mind was racing. His mother was never sick. In 32 years, he'd seen her with a cold maybe twice. She was tough as nails, strong as steel. "When did this start?" Minjun demanded, pulling out his phone. "It's nothing, really." "Yama, when?" Sung-hee sighed. "Maybe 2 weeks ago? I've been very tired. And sometimes I feel dizzy. And my joints ache. But I'm 61 years old, Minjun. Old people get tired and achy. It's normal." "This isn't normal." Minjun was already dialing. "I'm taking you to the hospital." No, you just got here. I made japchae your favorite." "Hospital. Now." When Minjun used that tone, even his mother didn't argue. 20 minutes later, Sung-hee was being checked into Cedar Heights Medical Center, the most expensive private hospital in Los Angeles. Minjun had called ahead. The staff knew who he was, and a team of doctors was already waiting. The doctors ran tests. Blood work. X-rays. Scans. Minjun paced the waiting room like a caged tiger, his men standing nervously nearby. Nobody spoke to him. When Minjun was worried, Everyone knew to stay quiet. 3 hours later, Dr. Richard Harrison, the hospital's head of internal medicine, called Min-jun into his office. "Mr. Kim, please sit down." "I'll stand. Tell me what's wrong with my mother." Dr. Harrison looked uncomfortable. "Your mother has a very rare blood disorder. It's called acquired pure red cell aplasia. Essentially, her bone marrow has stopped producing red blood cells. Her blood can't carry oxygen properly throughout her body." Min-jun's hands clenched into fists. "So treat it. Fix it." Dr. Harrison's face grew more serious. "Mr. Kim, this condition is extremely rare and very difficult to treat. We can try immunosuppressive therapy, blood transfusions to manage symptoms." "Will she survive?" The pause that followed lasted only 2 seconds, but to Min-jun, it felt like a lifetime. "The survival rate for this condition is not good. If we can't get her into remission quickly, the outlook is..." Dr. Harrison trailed off. "Say it. Weeks. Maybe a month or 2 with aggressive treatment." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Min-jun grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. "You're telling me my mother is dying? We'll do everything we can." "Everything? Everything." Min-jun's voice rose. "I will pay anything. Experimental treatments. Specialists from anywhere in the world. I don't care what it costs. You will save my mother's life." Dr. Harrison looked genuinely sympathetic. "Mr. Kim, this isn't about money. This is about medical reality. There are some things that even unlimited resources can't fix." Min-jun stepped closer to the doctor's desk, his eyes hard as stone. "Then you'll figure out how to fix the impossible. Because if my mother dies, Dr. Harrison, I will hold you personally responsible. Do you understand what that means?" Dr. Harrison went pale. He understood perfectly. Over the next 2 weeks, Min-jun transformed room 304 into a command center. His mother received blood transfusions every other day. Specialists flew in from New York, from Boston, from Johns Hopkins. One expert came all the way from South Korea. Each one examined Sung-hee, looked at her charts, and ultimately shook their heads. "We're sorry. There's nothing more we can do. Perhaps make her comfortable." Min-jun refused to accept it. This was his mother, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. He'd built an empire of fear and money, and now, when it mattered most, none of it meant anything. Sung-hee grew weaker. Some days she couldn't stay awake for more than a few hours. But she still smiled when Min-jun visited, still tried to joke with him. "You're spending too much money on me," she said one afternoon, her voice barely above a whisper. "Money means nothing if I can't use it to help you." On the 15th day, Dr. Harrison called Min-jun aside. "We've exhausted every option," the doctor said quietly. "The transfusions aren't working anymore. Her body is shutting down. I'm so sorry, Mr. Kim. We're looking at days now, not weeks." That night, Min-jun didn't go home. He sat in the chair beside his mother's bed, holding her fragile hand, watching her chest rise and fall with each labored breath. At 2:47 a.m., a young nurse came in to check Sung-hee's vitals. Min-jun had seen her before during the day shifts, but never at night. She was African American, probably in her late 20s, with her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name tag read, Grace Waters, RN. Grace moved quietly around the room, checking the 4, noting numbers on her tablet. She thought Min-jun was asleep, so she was startled when he spoke. "Is it tonight?" Grace turned, her eyes widening. "I'm sorry. Is my mother going to die tonight?" Grace looked at Sung-hee, then back at Min-jun. Something in her expression softened. "I don't know, Mr. Kim, but her vitals are getting weaker. It won't be long." Min-jun nodded slowly. "You know who I am? Everyone in the hospital knows who you are, sir." "Does that scare you?" Grace considered this. "Should it?" For the first time in weeks, Min-jun almost smiled. This nurse had courage. "Most people are afraid of me. Most people probably have a reason to be." Grace finished with the 4 and started to leave, but then she paused. She looked at Sung-hee again, studying her chart more carefully. Her eyebrows drew together. "What?" Min-jun asked sharply. "Nothing, I just..." Grace shook her head. "Never mind. Tell me." Grace bit her lip. "It's probably nothing. But these symptoms, my grandmother had a condition once that looked similar. The tiredness, the pale skin, the way her body just seemed to be giving up." Min-jun stood up. "Your grandmother survived?" "Yes, but Mr. Kim, it was different. She lived in rural Georgia. We didn't have access to good hospitals. My other grandmother, my mother's mother, was what people called a root woman. She knew healing herbs and old remedies passed down through generations." "What did she give your grandmother?" Grace looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Kim, that was folk medicine. It's not the same as modern medicine." "What did she?" Give. Her. Grace took a deep breath. A tea made from yellow dock root, dandelion, red clover, and a few other herbs. She said it purified the blood and helped the body remember how to heal itself. Could you make this tea? I suppose so. My grandmother taught me before she passed. But Mr. Kim, I could lose my license. Minjun moved closer. My mother is dying. Every doctor has given up. If there's even a chance. He paused. Please. Grace saw only a terrified son about to lose his mother. I'll need to gather the herbs. It'll take me a day or two. I understand. 2 days later, Grace returned during the night shift with a thermos and a clay bowl. The liquid inside was dark and smelled strange, earthy and bitter. By then, Sung-hee was barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow. The monitors showed her vitals dropping steadily. And that's when the hospital administrator walked in with security guards, having been tipped off about the unauthorized treatment. That's when Minjun's men reached for their weapons. That's when everything exploded into the crisis moment we started with. Sir, Grace said again, holding the bowl steady despite her fear. Your mother said yes. She wants to try. Minjun looked at his mother's face, then at Grace, then at the 3 security guards blocking the doorway. He had built an empire on making impossible choices. But this one was different. This one was about faith. Minjun stared at the 3 security guards blocking the doorway. Behind them stood Dr. Patricia Morris, the hospital administrator, her face red with anger. She held up her phone like it was a weapon. Mr. Kim, I've already called the police. This nurse is administering unauthorized substances to a patient. That's illegal. If you don't step aside right now, you'll be arrested too. Minjun didn't move. He looked down at his mother, lying still in the bed. Her eyes were closed. Her chest barely moved. The machine beside her beeped slowly, each beep seeming to take longer than the last. Then he looked at Grace. The young nurse held that clay bowl with both hands. Her arms were shaking, but not because the bowl was heavy. She was terrified. Minjun could see it in her eyes. But she hadn't run away. She was still standing there, still trying to help. How long? Minjun asked quietly. Grace blinked. Sir, how long after she drinks this before we know if it works? Grace swallowed hard. My grandmother said the first signs came within 12 hours. Real improvement took 3 days. But Mr. Kim, every person is different. I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises. Minjun turned to Dr. Morris. You said my mother has days to live. Maybe hours. That's correct, which is why we need to keep her comfortable, Anne. So if this nurse's medicine doesn't work, my mother dies. And if we do nothing, my mother dies anyway. Is that right? Dr. Morris's mouth opened and closed. She hadn't expected that logic. Well, yes, but there are proper procedures. Procedures. Minjun said the word like it tasted bad. My mother is dying, and you're worried about procedures? Mr. Kim, I understand you're upset, but we have rules for a reason. We can't just let anyone give patients random herbs and plants. What if it makes her worse? What if it kills her faster? This hospital could be sued. We could lose our license. And this nurse could go to jail. Minjun walked slowly toward Dr. Morris. His 3 men moved with him. The security guards stepped forward, their hands moving to their belts where their radios and pepper spray hung. The hallway went very quiet. Other nurses peeked out from nearby rooms, then quickly ducked back inside. Everyone could feel the danger in the air, thick as smoke. Let me explain something to you, Minjun said softly. His voice was calm, but there was ice underneath. My mother came to America with nothing. She worked every day of her life to give me a chance. She never asked for anything. She never complained. And now, when she needs help the most, the only person willing to try something is this nurse. So here's what's going to happen. He stepped closer. The security guards tensed. Grace is going to give my mother that medicine. We're going to see if it works. And you are going to leave this room and not come back unless I call you. Do you understand? Mr. Kim, I can't. I wasn't asking. Minjun's eyes went hard. I was telling. Dr. Morris's face turned pale. She looked at the security guards, but they wouldn't meet her eyes. Everyone knew who Minjun Kim was. Everyone knew what he could do. If something goes wrong, Dr. Morris said, her voice shaking, if your mother dies because of this witch's brew, it's on you. Not in this hospital. Agreed. Now get out. Dr. Morris turned and walked away fast, her high heels clicking on the floor. The security guards followed her. Minjun's men stayed at the door, making sure no one else came in. Minjun turned back to Grace. Do it. Grace's hands were still shaking as she approached the bed. Mrs. Kim? Can you hear me? Sung-hee's eyes opened just a tiny bit. They were cloudy and unfocused. "I have medicine for you," Grace said gently. "It's old medicine. The kind your grandmother might have known in Korea. Can you try to drink it for me?" Sung-hee's lips moved. No sound came out at first. Then, so quietly that Min-jun had to lean in to hear. "Any?" "Yes." Grace carefully lifted Sung-hee's head. Min-jun helped, supporting his mother's shoulders. Grace brought the bowl to Sung-hee's lips. The dark liquid touched her mouth. Sung-hee's face scrunched up. It clearly tasted terrible. But she swallowed, then swallowed again. And again. Grace gave her small sips, waiting between each one. It took almost 10 minutes to get half the bowl down. Finally, Sung-hee turned her head away. She couldn't drink anymore. "That's good," Grace said softly. "That's very good, Mrs. Kim. You did great." She gently laid Sung-hee's head back on the pillow. Min-jun stared at his mother's face, looking for any sign of change. But nothing happened. Sung-hee's eyes closed again. Her breathing stayed shallow and slow. "Now what?" Min-jun asked. "Now we wait," Grace said. "The medicine needs time to work. It has to travel through her blood, reach her bones, remind her body what it's supposed to do. How will we know if it's working? Her color might improve first. Her breathing might get easier. But Mr. Kim," Grace looked at him with sad, honest eyes. "It might not work at all. My grandmother's remedy helped my other grandmother, but that doesn't mean it will help everyone. I need you to understand that." Min-jun nodded. "When do you give her more?" "In 6 hours. And then every 6 hours after that until..." Grace trailed off. "Until she gets better or she dies." "Yes." Min-jun walked to the window. Outside, Los Angeles glowed with lights. Somewhere down there, his business was running. His men were collecting money, making deals, scaring people who needed to be scared. His empire kept turning like a machine. But up here, in this small hospital room, none of that mattered. "Tell me about your grandmother," Min-jun said suddenly. Grace looked surprised. "My grandmother? The one who knew the medicine. Tell me about her." Grace set the bowl down on the table. She pulled up a chair and sat down, like she was settling in for a story. Her name was Ruth Waters. She lived to be 93 years old. She was born in Georgia in 1920, back when things were very different for Black people in the South. Her mother taught her about healing plants. And her mother learned from her mother. The knowledge went back and back, all the way to Africa. "Why plants?" Min-jun asked. "Because Black people couldn't always go to doctors back then. Sometimes doctors wouldn't see them. Sometimes they couldn't afford it. So they had to heal themselves. They learned which plants helped with fevers, which ones cleaned wounds, which ones made pain go away. They learned which roots made blood strong." Grace smiled, remembering. "My grandmother had a garden behind her house. She grew everything there. Yellow dock, dandelion, burdock root, red clover. She made teas and poultices and salves. People came from all over the county to see her when they were sick. Did doctors get angry with her? Some did. They said she was practicing medicine without a license. But she never charged money. She said healing was a gift from God, and you don't charge for gifts. So the police left her alone. And she taught you?" Grace nodded. "I spent every summer with her from the time I was 5 until she died when I was 17. She taught me which plants were which, how to harvest them at the right time, how to prepare them. She said the knowledge needed to be passed down, or it would die with her generation." "Why did you become a nurse instead of what did you call it? A root woman?" Grace laughed softly. "My mama wouldn't hear of it. She said, 'Baby, you're going to college. You're going to get a real job with benefits and a pension. You're not going to be picking plants in the woods like some old country woman.' So I went to nursing school. But I never forgot what Grandma Ruth taught me." Min-jun turned from the window. "Does the medicine you gave my mother have a name?" "Grandma called it blood builder tea. She said it woke up lazy blood and made it remember how to be strong." They sat in silence for a while. The machines beeped. Sung-hee breathed in and out, in and out. Grace checked her watch. "I need to go do my other rounds," she said. "But I'll be back in 6 hours with more tea. Will you be here?" "I'm not leaving," Min-jun said. Grace stood up. She looked at Min-jun for a long moment, like she was trying to figure something out. "You really love her, don't you? Your mother. She's all I have." "I don't think that's true, Mr. Kim. I think you have a lot. Money, power, people who work for you. But she's all you care about. There's a difference." After Grace left, Min-jun sat in the chair beside his mother's bed. He held her hand. It felt so thin and cold, like holding a bird's wing. "Yama," he whispered. "I know you probably can't hear me, but I need you to fight. I need you to be strong, like you've always been. That nurse gave you medicine. Good medicine. You need to let it work. Sung-hee didn't respond. But Min-jun kept talking anyway. Do you remember when I was 7 and I got in that fight at school? That boy called you a name because you cleaned offices. He said his mother was better than you. I punched him in the face and got suspended for 3 days. Min-jun smiled at the memory. You didn't yell at me. You just said, Min-jun, you don't need to fight my battles. I fight my own battles. But I told you, you shouldn't have to. I should protect you. And you hugged me and said I was your brave boy. His voice got quieter. I'm still trying to protect you, Yama. I built this whole empire thinking that if I was powerful enough, rich enough, scary enough, then nothing could hurt you. But I was wrong. Money can't fix this. Fear can't fix this. All I can do is sit here and hope that a nurse with her grandmother's tea can do what $1 million couldn't. The hours crawled by. Min-jun didn't sleep. He just watched his mother breathe. At 8:47 a.m., Grace came back with more tea. This time, Sung-hee could barely swallow. Most of the liquid dribbled out of her mouth. It's okay, Grace said gently, wiping Sung-hee's chin. You got some down. That's what matters. At 2:47 p.m., Grace returned again. This time, Sung-hee didn't open her eyes at all. Grace had to pry her mouth open gently to pour the tea in, making sure she didn't choke. Min-jun felt hope dying in his chest. It wasn't working. His mother was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do but watch. At 8:47 p.m., when Grace came back for the 4th dose, Min-jun stopped her at the door. Maybe we should stop, he said. His voice sounded hollow. Maybe we're just making her suffer more. Grace looked at him. Do you want to give up? I don't want her to suffer. Mr. Kim, my grandmother always said healing doesn't happen on our schedule. It happens on the body's schedule. Sometimes it takes longer than we think. Sometimes it happens all at once, like a switch turning on. But if we stop now, we'll never know. And if we keep going and it doesn't work, then at least we tried everything. At least we didn't give up. Min-jun stepped aside. Grace went to the bed and gave Sung-hee the 4th dose. This time, even less went down. After Grace left, Min-jun put his head in his hands. He felt exhausted. Not just tired, exhausted all the way down to his bones. He'd been awake for almost 48 hours straight. His phone buzzed. It was Dae-young, his second-in-command. There were problems with the shipment. A rival gang was moving into their territory. Decisions needed to be made. Min-jun turned his phone off. Let the empire crumble. Let the whole thing burn to the ground. None of it mattered without his mother. He must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing he knew, someone was shaking his shoulder. Mr. Kim. Mr. Kim, wake up. Min-jun's eyes snapped open. Grace stood over him, and her face looked strange. Not sad. Not worried. Something else. What? What's wrong? Look, Grace said, pointing at the bed. Min-jun looked at his mother. At first, he didn't see anything different. But then he realized, her skin didn't look quite so gray anymore. There was a tiny bit of color in her cheeks. Just a hint of pink, like the very first light of dawn. Her vitals are up, Grace said, her voice shaking with excitement. Not a lot, but they're up. Her blood pressure is better. Her oxygen levels are better. Her heart rate is stronger. Min-jun stood up so fast his chair fell over. Is it working? Is the medicine working? I think so. I think it might be. But Mr. Kim, we need to keep going. This is just the beginning. For the first time in weeks, Min-jun felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Real hope. His mother was fighting. The medicine was working. And maybe, just maybe, the impossible was about to happen. But Min-jun didn't know that the hardest part was still ahead. He didn't know that saving his mother was about to cost him more than he ever imagined. And he definitely didn't know that someone had been watching Grace very carefully. Someone who wanted her grandmother's secrets for themselves. By the 3rd day, Sung-hee opened her eyes and stayed awake for 10 whole minutes. By the 4th day, she asked for water and actually drank it herself. By the 5th day, she sat up in bed and told Min-jun his hair was too long and he needed a haircut. Min-jun laughed. Actually, I laughed. He couldn't remember the last time he'd done that. His men, standing guard outside the room, looked at each other in shock. They'd never heard their boss laugh before. Dr. Harrison came to check on Sung-hee that afternoon. He studied her chart for a long time, his eyebrows getting higher and higher. I don't understand this, he muttered. Her red blood cell count is rising. Her energy levels are improving. Mrs. Kim, how do you feel? Hungry, Sung-hee said. The food here is terrible. When can I go home? Dr. Harrison looked at Min-jun. What happened? What changed? Min-jun just smiled. Maybe she's stronger than your medicine thought possible. But not everyone was happy about the miracle. That evening, as Grace came in with the 6th dose of tea, 2 men in dark suits were waiting in the hallway. They weren't Minjun's men. They looked different, cleaner, more official. "Grace Waters," one of them said. Grace froze. "Yes, I'm Detective Chun. This is Detective Rodriguez. We need to ask you some questions about the treatment you've been giving to Mrs. Kim." Grace's face went pale. I need to give her medicine first." "That can wait. This is important." Minjun appeared in the doorway. "No, the medicine cannot wait. Ask your questions later." Detective Chin looked at Minjun. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or respect. With Minjun, those two things often look the same. "Mr. Kim, we're investigating a possible case of..." I said later. Minjun's voice dropped low. "My mother needs her medicine. Everything else can wait." The detectives looked at each other. Then Detective Rodriguez nodded. "Fine. We'll wait out here." Grace hurried into the room. Her hands shook so badly that she almost dropped the bowl. Minjun took it from her and set it on the table. "What do they want?" he asked quietly. "The hospital reported me," Grace whispered. "Dr. Morris called the police. She said I'm practicing medicine without a license. They could arrest me, Mr. Kim. They could put me in jail." "No one is putting you in jail. You can't stop the police." Minjun looked at her with eyes that had seen things Grace couldn't imagine. "Watch me." Grace gave Sung-hee the tea. Sung-hee drank it all this time, making faces at the bitter taste but getting it down. She was getting stronger every hour. After Grace finished, Minjun walked out into the hallway. The two detectives straightened up. "Ask your questions," Minjun said. Detective Chin pulled out a small notebook. "Mr. Kim, did you pay Nurse Waters to give your mother unauthorized treatment?" "No." "Did you threaten her or force her to do it?" "No." "Did you know that the substances she was giving your mother weren't approved by the FDA?" "Yes." Detective Rodriguez jumped in. "So you knowingly allowed an unqualified person to give your mother unapproved drugs?" "She's a registered nurse. That makes her qualified. And they're not drugs. They're herbs. Plants. The kind of medicine people have been using for thousands of years. That doesn't make it legal." Minjun stepped closer. "Let me ask you something, detectives. If your mother was dying, and every doctor said there was no hope, and someone came along who might be able to save her, would you let the law stop you?" Detective Chun and Rodriguez didn't answer. "My mother was dead," Minjun continued. "The doctors gave up. They said make her comfortable and wait for the end. This nurse was the only person willing to try something different. And it worked. My mother is alive. She's getting better. So tell me, who exactly is the victim here?" Detective Chin closed his notebook. "Mr. Kim, we understand your position. But the law is the law. Nurse Waters violated medical regulations. The hospital wants to press charges. The hospital wants to cover itself legally," Minjun said. "They're afraid I'll sue them for giving up on my mother. So they're making Grace the scapegoat. That's not our concern. Our concern is..." "How much?" Both detectives blinked. "Excuse me? How much does the hospital want? How much will this go away?" Detective Rodriguez's face turned red. "Mr. Kim, you can't bribe us. We're police officers. I'm not bribing you. I'm asking what it will take to resolve this situation legally. The hospital is worried about being sued. I can sign papers saying I won't sue them. I can make a donation to their legal defense fund. I can do many things. What I won't do is let them destroy that nurse's life because she saved my mother." Detective Chin studied Minjun for a long moment. "We'll talk to the hospital administration. See if there's a way to resolve this without filing charges. But Mr. Kim, you need to understand. There are rules. You can't just ignore them because you don't like them. Rules," Minjun said quietly, "are made by people who've never had to watch their mother die." The detectives left. Minjun went back into the room, where Grace was crying quietly in the corner. "They're going to arrest me," she sobbed. "I'm going to lose my license. I'm going to lose everything." "No, you're not. You can't stop this, Mr. Kim. I broke the law. I knew the risks when I did it, and I did it anyway." "Why?" Minjun asked suddenly. "Why did you risk everything for a stranger?" Grace wiped her eyes. "Because my grandmother taught me that healing is more important than rules." She said, "Baby, when someone is dying and you have the knowledge to help them, you help. You don't ask permission. You don't worry about what might happen to you. You just help." So that's what I did. Minjun sat down. For the first time, he really looked at Grace. Not as a nurse, not as someone useful, but as a person. She was maybe 28 years old. She probably had student loans from nursing school. She probably struggled to pay rent in expensive Los Angeles. And she'd risked everything, her job, her license, her freedom, to help someone she didn't even know. I owe you a debt, Minjun said slowly. A debt I can never fully repay. But I can try. I don't want money, Mr. Kim. I'm not offering money. I'm offering protection. I'm going to make sure the hospital drops this. I'm going to make sure you keep your license. And I'm going to make sure no one ever bothers you about this again. How? Minjun smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. I have ways. Over the next 24 hours, several interesting things happened. First, 3 members of Cedar Heights Medical Center's board of directors received anonymous phone calls. The callers seemed to know very specific things about very private matters. Donations that weren't quite legal. Relationships that weren't quite appropriate. Decisions that weren't quite ethical. Second, Detective Chen's captain received a visit from a city councilman who suggested that pursuing charges against Nurse Waters might not be in anyone's best interest. After all, the patient survived. The family was happy. Why waste taxpayer money on a case no jury would convict? Third, Dr. Patricia Morris found herself in a meeting with the hospital's lawyers. They explained very carefully that if the hospital pursued criminal charges against Grace Waters, Mr. Kim might decide to share certain information about the hospital's treatment of his mother. Information about how they gave up, how they refused to try experimental treatments, how they essentially left her to die. The lawsuit that would follow could cost the hospital millions, maybe tens of millions. Was it really worth it to punish one nurse? By the end of the day, all charges were dropped. Grace was suspended for 2 weeks without pay, a slap on the wrist, basically, and then allowed to return to work. When Grace found out, she sat down on the floor right there in the hospital hallway and cried. Minjun found her there an hour later. It's done. You're safe. Grace looked up at him with red, puffy eyes. What did you do? What needed to be done? Did you hurt anyone? No. I just reminded some people that doing the right thing is usually easier than doing the wrong thing. Grace stood up slowly. My grandmother used to say that some people are put in our path for a reason. She said the universe sends us exactly who we need, exactly when we need them. I don't believe in the universe, Minjun said. I believe in cause and effect, action and consequence. And yet here we are. You needed someone to save your mother. I needed someone to protect me. We found each other. Minjun didn't have an answer for that. That evening, Sung-hee was well enough to sit up and eat real food. Grace brought her soup from a Korean restaurant nearby, soft tofu stew, the kind that's easy on the stomach. Sung-hee ate 2 whole bowls. Then she looked at Grace and Minjun sitting on opposite sides of her bed. You two saved my life, she said softly. The medicine saved you, Yama, Minjun said. No. Sung-hee shook her head. Grace brought the medicine. But you believed in it. You protected her. You made it possible. You both saved me. She reached out and took Grace's hand with her left hand and Minjun's hand with her right hand. In Korea, we have a saying, "Un-hai rule gapgetsiamanida." It means, I will repay this kindness. Grace, you gave me my life back. How can I ever repay that? You don't need to repay anything, Mrs. Kim. I'm just glad you're better. And Minjuna, Sung-hee squeezed her son's hand. You've spent your whole life trying to protect me. But this time you did something different. You trusted me. You had faith. You believed in something you couldn't control. I'm very proud of you. Minjun felt something strange happening in his chest. A tightness. A pressure. He realized with shock that he was about to cry. He hadn't cried since he was 12 years old. He stood up quickly. I need to make some phone calls. Business. He walked out of the room before either of them could see the tears. But outside in the hallway, standing by the window, he let himself feel it. Relief. Gratitude. Love. All the emotions he'd spent 20 years burying came flooding up. His mother was alive. Against all odds, against all logic, against everything the doctors said. His mother was alive. Minjun pulled out his phone. He had messages from Dae-young. The business needed attention. Decisions needed to be made. Money needed to be moved. For the first time in his adult life, Minjun thought, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. What was the point of an empire if he couldn't save the person he loved most? What was the point of power if it was useless when it mattered? But he pushed those thoughts away. That was a problem for another day. Behind him, through the window in the door, he could see his mother and Grace talking and laughing. 2 women from completely different worlds, brought together by desperation and hope. Minjun didn't believe in miracles. He believed in leverage and force and knowing where to apply pressure. But watching his mother smile, Really smile, not the weak, dying smile from last week, but a real, genuine, full-of-life smile. He had to admit. Maybe some things couldn't be explained by logic alone. Maybe Grace's grandmother was right. Maybe sometimes the universe sent you exactly who you needed. And maybe, just maybe, Minjun Kim needed more than money and power. Maybe he needed to learn what it meant to be human again. But the story was far from over. Someone had been watching from the shadows. Someone who wanted Grace's knowledge for very different reasons. And that someone was about to make a move that would put everyone in danger. 2 weeks after Sung-hee left the hospital, everything seemed perfect. Sung-hee was back in her small apartment, stronger every day. Grace visited 3 times a week to check on her and bring more of the blood-building tea. The two women had become close friends, cooking together, sharing stories, laughing like they'd known each other for years. Minjun visits every day now, not just Sundays. He found himself actually looking forward to those visits, the normalcy of it, the peace. His mother's apartment felt like the only place in the world where he could just be a son instead of a crime boss. But peace never lasts long in Minjun's world. It was a Tuesday evening when everything fell apart. Minjun was at his warehouse office in downtown LA, going through paperwork with Dae-young, when his phone rang. It was Grace, and she was crying so hard he could barely understand her. Minjun, they took her. They came to my apartment, and they took her. Minjun's blood turned to ice. Took who? Grace, slow down. Who took who? Your mother. 3 men broke into my apartment while I was making tea for her. They had guns. They grabbed her and they left me a message. What message? Grace's voice shook. They said if I want to see her alive again, I need to bring them my grandmother's recipe book. All of her remedies. Every single one. They said I have 24 hours. Minjun was already moving, snapping his fingers at Dae-young. Where are you now? Still at my apartment. Minjun, I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. I should have. Listen to me, Grace. Lock your door. Don't open it for anyone except me. I'm coming right now. Do you understand? Yes. Good. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Minjun hung up and turned to Dae-young. Someone kidnapped my mother. Get every man we have on the street. I want to know who did this and where they took her. Now. Dae-young's eyes widened. Boss, who would be stupid enough to? I don't care who they are. Find them. And when you do, don't touch them. I want that pleasure for myself. Minjun drove through LA traffic like a madman, running red lights, cutting off other cars. His mind raced. Who would dare kidnap his mother? Everyone in the criminal underworld knew that Sung-hee Kim was untouchable. Taking her was a death sentence. Unless it wasn't about him at all. Unless it was about Grace. When he reached Grace's apartment building in Koreatown, he took the stairs 3 at a time. Grace opened the door before he could knock. Her eyes were red and swollen. She fell into his arms, sobbing. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Stop. Minjun held her shoulders and looked into her eyes. This is not your fault. Tell me exactly what happened. Grace took a shaky breath. Your mother came over for tea like she does every Tuesday. We were in the kitchen. I was showing her how to prepare the yellow dock root. Then someone knocked on the door. I looked through the peephole and saw a delivery man with a package. So I opened the door and... She stopped, wiping her eyes. 3 men pushed their way in. They were white, all of them wearing black clothes and black masks. One grabbed your mother. She tried to fight, but she's still weak. Another one pointed a gun at me. The third one, the leader, said, We know about your grandmother's remedies. We know you cured that Korean woman. We want all of it. Every recipe, every remedy, everything the old woman knew. What did you say? I said my grandmother never wrote anything down. It's all in my head. And he said, Then write it down. You have 24 hours. We'll call you with instructions. And if you tell the police, the old woman dies. Then they just left. They took her and left. Minjun's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Did you recognize any of them? Accents? Anything? The leader had a scar on his hand. I saw it when he pointed the gun at me. A big scar across his knuckles, like someone slashed him with a knife. Minjun pulled out his phone and called Dae-young. I need you to find out who's been asking questions about Grace Waters. Check with our contacts in the pharmaceutical industry. Check with anyone who deals in alternative medicine. Someone wants her grandmother's remedies badly enough to kidnap my mother. Find out who. He hung up and looked at Grace. Pack a bag. You're coming with me. Where? Somewhere safe. If they took my mother to get to you, they might come back. But they said they'd call. And when they do, you'll answer. But you're not staying here alone. 30 minutes later, Grace was in Minjun's penthouse apartment in downtown LA. It was nothing like she'd expected. She'd imagined something dark and scary, maybe with weapons on the walls. Instead, it was clean and modern, with big windows that looked out over the city. "The guest room is down that hall," Minjun said, pointing. "The kitchen is fully stocked. Don't leave for any reason." "What are you going to do?" "Find my mother." "Minjun." Grace grabbed his arm. "What if they hurt her?" "What if?" "They won't. Not yet. They need you to cooperate first." "That gives us time." But Minjun wasn't as confident as he sounded. His mother was still recovering. The stress alone could kill her. And if these people realized that the remedies only worked because Grace knew how to prepare them correctly, they might decide they didn't need Sung-hee alive after all. Minjun spent the next 6 hours calling in every favor he had. His network of informants, corrupt cops, and street soldiers spread across LA, asking questions, shaking down anyone who might know something. Finally, at 2 a.m., Dae-young called back. "Boss, I found something. There's a pharmaceutical company called Hendrix Biomed. They've been buying up small companies that research natural remedies, trying to patent traditional medicines and sell them at huge markups. 3 weeks ago, one of their scouts was at Cedar Heights Medical Center researching unusual recoveries. They heard about my mother." "Exactly. And boss, the head of their acquisitions department is a man named Marcus Webb. Ex-military. Dishonorable discharge for black market dealings. And he has a scar across his right hand from a knife fight in Afghanistan." Minjun smiled, but it was a terrible smile. "Where does he live?" "Boss, you can't just..." "Where? Does he live?" Dae-young sighed and gave him an address in Santa Monica. Minjun took 4 of his best men and drove to Santa Monica. Marcus Webb lived in an expensive beach house, the kind you could only afford by doing very dirty work for very rich people. They didn't knock. They kicked the door down at 3:30 a.m. Marcus Webb woke up to find 5 armed men standing around his bed. He reached for the gun on his nightstand, but Minjun kicked it away. "Looking for this?" Minjun asked, holding up the gun. Then he tossed it aside. "I don't need weapons for what I'm about to do to you." Marcus tried to act tough. "Do you know who I work for? Do you know what Hendrix Biomed will do to you?" Minjun grabbed Marcus by his throat and lifted him half off the bed. "Do you know whose mother you kidnapped?" Marcus's eyes went wide. We didn't know she was anyone important. We just needed leverage to get the remedies." "Where is she?" "I can't tell you that. My bosses will." Minjun slammed Marcus against the wall. "Your bosses are not here." "I am. And I am going to break every bone in your body until you tell me where my mother is." He started with Marcus's left hand, grabbed his pinky finger and bent it backward until it snapped. Marcus screamed. "Where is she?" "I don't." Snap. Another finger is broken. "Where is she?" By the 4th finger, Marcus was sobbing. "Warehouse. There's a warehouse in Vernon. 5th and Central. That's where we take people when we need information." "How many guards?" 4. "Just 4. Please, no more." Minjun dropped Marcus on the floor. "If my mother has even 1 bruise on her, I'm coming back for the rest of your fingers. Then I'll start on your toes. Then your arms. Then your legs. Do you understand?" Marcus nodded, cradling his broken hand. Minjun and his men left. They drove to Vernon, an industrial area full of warehouses and factories. The building at 5th and Central was dark and quiet. "Too quiet. Could be a trap," Dae-young warned. "I don't care." They went in fast and hard. For guards, just like Marcus said. Minjun's men took them down before they could even shout for help. No shots fired. Quick and silent. And there, in a small office in the back of the warehouse, sitting in a chair with her hands tied. "Sung-hee. Yama." Minjun ran to her, untying the ropes. "Are you hurt? Did they hurt you?" Sung-hee looked up at him, and incredibly, she was smiling. "Minjun, you worry too much." "I'm fine." "Fine? They kidnapped you." "Yes, and it was very annoying. The food was terrible, and they wouldn't let me use the bathroom. But they didn't hurt me." She stood up, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had been. "Is Grace okay?" "She's safe. She's at my apartment." "Good. That girl has been through enough." They got Sung-hee to the car. But as they were driving back to Minjun's penthouse, Sung-hee said something that surprised him. "You can't kill them, Minjun." "What?" "These pharmaceutical people. I know you want to, but you can't." "Yama, they kidnapped you. They threatened Grace. They deserve to be stopped, yes. But not killed. Because killing them won't solve the real problem." Minjun didn't understand. "What real problem?" Sung-hee looked at him with wise, tired eyes. "The problem is that Grace has knowledge that people will always want. Her grandmother's remedies could help so many people. But as long as that knowledge is secret, as long as only Grace knows it, she'll always be in danger. People will always try to steal it or force her to share it. So what do? We protect it differently. When they got back to the penthouse, Grace ran to Sung-hee and hugged her tight, both women crying. Min-jun let them have their moment. Then Sung-hee sat them both down. "Grace, my dear," Sung-hee said gently, "your grandmother's remedies saved my life. They're precious and powerful, but they're also dangerous as long as they're hidden. People like these pharmaceutical men will always try to take them." "I know," Grace said miserably. "Maybe I should just give them what they want." "No," Sung-hee said firmly. "That's exactly what they want, to steal your grandmother's legacy and make money from it. But there's another way." She looked at Min-jun. "My son has money and connections. We could start a clinic. A real clinic where people can come for help, where you can teach others your grandmother's remedies, where the knowledge is shared freely, not sold or stolen." Min-jun blinked. "A clinic? Yes. A free clinic where Grace can practice her grandmother's medicine legally, where she can train other people, where the remedies belong to everyone, not locked in one person's head." Grace's eyes lit up. "You mean like what my grandmother did? But bigger? Legal?" "Exactly." Min-jun thought about it. He thought about all the money he'd made from crime, from hurting people, from fear. And he thought about how none of it had been able to save his mother. Only Grace's kindness and her grandmother's wisdom had done that. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll do it. I'll fund it. Grace will run it. We'll call it." He paused. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Ruth," Grace said softly. "Ruth Waters. Then we'll call it the Ruth Waters Healing Center. A place where traditional medicine and modern medicine work together. Where people can get help no matter who they are or how much money they have." Grace started crying again, but this time they were happy tears. Sung-hee smiled and patted Min-jun's hand. "See, this is the son I always knew you could be." Over the next 6 months, everything changed. Min-jun opened the Ruth Waters Healing Center in Koreatown. It was small at first, just a storefront with a few rooms. But word spread quickly. People came from all over LA seeking help that regular hospitals couldn't provide. Grace taught 3 other nurses her grandmother's remedies. She wrote them down carefully in a book that was kept at the clinic, free for anyone to study. The knowledge was no longer secret. It belonged to the community. Min-jun slowly began stepping away from his criminal empire. It wasn't easy. Some people didn't want to let him go. But he was patient, delegating more, pulling back piece by piece. Sung-hee volunteered at the clinic every day, greeting patients in Korean, Spanish, and English, making everyone feel welcome. And Min-jun found himself spending more and more time at the clinic too. Not running it, Grace did that. But helping, protecting, making sure no one bothered them. One evening, 6 months after the clinic opened, Min-jun stood outside and watched through the window. His mother was making tea for an elderly patient. Grace was teaching a young nurse how to identify yellow dock roots. People were laughing and healing and helping each other. "Your grandmother would be proud," Min-jun said to Grace when she came outside for a break. Grace smiled. "I think she would. She always said healing was about more than just medicine. It was about community, about people taking care of each other." "I never understood that before," Min-jun admitted. "I thought power was about control, about making people fear you. But watching this," he gestured at the clinic, "this is real power. Helping people, healing them, bringing them together. You're learning," Grace said gently. "It's not too late to change who you are." Min-jun looked at her. "I've done terrible things, Grace. Things I can't undo." "No, you can't undo them. But you can do better going forward. My grandmother used to say, 'Baby, every day you wake up is a chance to start again. Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow isn't here yet. All you've got is today. So make today count.'" Min-jun thought about that. Every day was a chance to start again. Inside the clinic, his mother laughed at something a patient said. The sound made Min-jun smile. His mother was alive. Grace was safe. The clinic was helping people. Maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Maybe that was everything. "Thank you," Min-jun said quietly to Grace. "For saving my mother. For teaching me what really matters. For giving me a chance to be someone better." Grace hugged him. "You saved yourself, Min-jun. I just showed you the path. You chose to walk it." And as the sun set over Los Angeles, Min-jun Kim, former crime boss, former bad man, but now just a son who loved his mother and wanted to do better, realized something important. Miracles weren't just about impossible healings or ancient remedies. Sometimes miracles were about second chances. Sometimes they were about finding family in unexpected places. And sometimes they were about learning that the greatest power in the world isn't money or fear or control. It's love. It's kind. It's choosing to help instead of hurt. That was the real remedy. The one that healed not just bodies, but souls. And Minjun Kim was finally truly healed. The end. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and hear more amazing stories. Drop a comment and tell us what you learned from Minjun, Grace, and Sunghee's story. Remember, it's never too late to change. And sometimes the greatest healing comes from the most unexpected places. Until next time, take care of each other.